How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to yet another many interpretations of video, where today we are looking at our very first sauropod. Of course, this is extremely exciting. They're like a group of dinosaurs that are just incredibly popular. A lot of people, when they hear the name dinosaur, they'll automatically think of, a sauropod or something like that. It just has a very iconic, just overall look to it. Now, we are looking at both Apatosaurus and Brontosaurus, and the reason why I decided to do that is because they kind of have an intertwined history for the most part. It's very interesting. I won't dive into it too much right now for the Apatosaurus segment. Rather, I'll get into that a little bit more when we get into the Brontosaurus segment of the video. Also, full disclosure, there's not going to be, every single media interpretation in this video for quite a few different reasons. It's mainly because I couldn't find ample resources to gauge the best look at these animals. So I just had to leave them out, unfortunately. But anyway, let's go ahead and get right into this. There's a lot of really cool designs to look at. Now, as I mentioned before, we are looking at Apatosaurus first. And what fitting way to start than with Land Before Time. This is an extremely iconic portrayal of the animal. Littlefoot in particular and his family have kind of gone back and forth in terms of being classified as either a Brontosaurus or an Apatosaurus. But I figured I'd just put him in the Apatosaurus section because I think that's what he's classified as today in this day and age. Now, they have the very basic sauropod appearance, and they have a lot of really cool color variation between individuals. I think it's really cool to see the difference between, say, him and his grandparents, as well as, his mother and his grandparents, and just the other Apatosaurs that you see quite frequently throughout the course of the franchise. So this is a great start for looking at our designs of Apatosaurus. Next up, we will look at Stanley and the dinosaurs. We have an Apatosaurus here that has a very interesting looking look to it, essentially. It's very low to the ground with a shorter neck. The head is also a little bit elongated, almost like a Diplodocus head, which matches up. Apatosaurus did have a head that was very similar to that of Diplodocus, especially with those very interesting looking teeth that were used to strip leaves off of branches. So of course that works out. And of course it has extremely wrinkly skin. Just an interesting design flair in terms of the animal. Next up, we have the Dinosaurs, this little PBS docuseries. We get a very, very cool looking Apatosaurus right here. Very representative of its time, that being 1992. It checks the boxes of what an Apatosaurus should look like a really thick neck that kind of thins out a little bit when it gets to the head, and a head that is very small in comparison to the rest of its body, as well as these huge legs. I can't get the best look at the way that the legs look, but I will probably be looking at the feet whenever I get the chance, simply because I think that Apatosaurus and Brontosaurus feet are very, very interesting. Because these two animals, they had like really solid front limbs with one claw on either foot that are on the innermost part of the feet, as well as 3 claws on the hind legs. So they are very interesting feet and something I will be looking out for. These designs, I think, look really good and I think fit the animal very well. We get an older one and a younger one, and yeah, no, I'm a fan of them. And then we will look at the Walking with Dinosaurs, particularly the Ballad of Big Al special, where there are some Apatosaurs present in the little special, and so in terms of designs, they are redesigned Diplodocus, essentially. Like the Diplodocus from the original Walking with Dinosaurs series, just there's a few minor adjustments, such as those spikes being removed. Because it's, basically the Diplodocus design, it doesn't match up too particularly well to Apatosaurus. Like Apatosaurus would raise its head a little bit more upright than this. I mean, Diplodocus did that in life too, but in terms of this design right here, I mean, the head is probably, it fits up pretty well because, as I mentioned, they had a very Diplodocus-like head, probably on account of them being Diplodokids. And it does have like the huge whip-like tail, something that was present on these animals. One thing I do want to point out, I really like the colors and the patterns that they decided to change it to, because of course they did change that little aspect of the the Diplodocus design. So I do like the way that those look, and honestly, when you're just kind of like looking at them as their brief little appearance, I think they look really solid. You probably wouldn't even notice that they were just simply I don't think you would notice that it was just the Diplodocus model that was used. So yeah, it looks pretty decent, it looks pretty fun, all things considered. After that, we have When Dinosaurs Roamed America. As a child, I assumed that these were Diplodocus. I don't know if I remember John Goodman ever calling them Apatosaurus, but I thought they were Diplodocus, and that's mainly because of those spikes. I'm not too sure if Apatosaurus would have had those. I think we're pretty certain that Diplodocus had them because like really close relatives of Diplodocus had them. I don't really know if that extends to Apatosaurus, so I'm not really going to touch that subject right now. I think that the design's pretty good, really. I mean, the neck is probably held down a little bit too low, but the tail looks really good, and it kind of seems like there's too many toes on its front limbs. As I mentioned before, it kind of had like solid front limbs with just a sharp claw on the inside of its foot. I think the claw is present. From what I can tell, these aren't the highest res images, and the footage that I find, I can't really get the best look at it. But I think the claw is there, and I just think that they've added a few more toes than were present on Apatosaurus. But I do really like this design. The solid color, it's fine. I think it's fun to see a bit more like flair in the coloration, as well as some extra patterns added to the color, but I think that this is pretty passable as the animal. Next up, we'll look at Dinosaur Train. This one does correctly show it lifting its neck up a little bit more than some of the previous designs. Did I say Dinosaur King or Dinosaur Train? I hope I said Dinosaur Train. This is Dinosaur Train. The purple colors mixed with the blues, the kind of counter shading that it has going on, as well as just the overall build, I think, looks really good. I've mentioned it several times that, of course, Dinosaur Train does try to fit its particular style, and this is, of course, just another example of that. I think it looks really good for the show. After that, we have Dinosaur King. Now, I think this is a really cool design. I think it's really thick, especially in the neck, though the neck does seem a little bit short. It's got the small head, as well as spikes that kind of go down the midline. As I mentioned with the When Dinosaurs Roamed America, I don't know if something like that necessarily extends to dinosaurs like Apatosaurus or Brontosaurus. But all things considered, I think this is really cool, and is like a big standout in terms of the design choices for Dinosaur King. So really solid design. After that, we have the Jurassic franchise, of course, Jurassic World. Very sad scene in the first Jurassic film when we get to, or Jurassic World film, when we get to see the massacre that was done on the Apatosaurus herd, and the only practical effect that was used in that movie, by the way. Anyway, the design, it looks pretty good. It checks out, and I certainly think that it fits the style of the kind of 90s interpretations of these animals, more so than some of the other Jurassic World designs. I think that this one certainly fits that style a bit more. It does have the innermost toe on its front limbs. Only thing is that the back limbs have what looks like 5 toes instead of 3. But it does have the whip-like tail, a smaller head, and the neck does seem a little bit thin. But I do think that this is definitely a good design when thinking in the context of, trying to fit us the Jurassic Park style. Like, I could definitely see this being what it looked like back in when the first Jurassic Park came out. So I think that it looks really good. But of course, in the Lego Jurassic World game, we did get a Lego version of that. And you know me, I love Lego versions. So it is based off of the Jurassic World film. So it has the same basic coloration going on, and it's Lego-fied. So you're not really going to see any accurate flares placed into it. It's just fun to see. I really wish we'd see a little bit more actual Lego minifigures that were released. I wouldn't mind seeing an Apatosaurus one. I really want to see a Spinosaurus one officially released, but Apatosaurus I think would be really cool to see. We already released Brachiosaurus. Maybe one day. Now, I'm not too sure how accurate this is, but in Transformers Age of Extinction, there is that beginning sequence where we get to see little dinosaurs like the Psittacosaurus and a herd of dinosaurs kind of getting demolished by these alien robots. And the sauropods here, I have heard a few sources that these are meant to be Apatosaurus, which... we won't dive too much into what time this takes place, because if it's at the end of the Cretaceous, then Apatosaurus should be extinct by now. Anyway, it's hard to get a good idea of the way that they look. They do move a bit too fast, like they're really sprinting in this short little segment, and it's just they're such in the distance that I can't really get a good idea of the way that they look. But they are certainly just gray blobs. Which is something I'm kind of getting tired of in terms of dinosaur designs. Like, just add a few more colors, a little bit more flair, and I think it'd be a lot more fun to see them. But yeah, that's what that potential stampede is consisted of, at least with those sauropod dinosaurs. Then we have the Good Dinosaur. There's a family of Apatosaurs that live here. Of course, Arlo being the main character, and this movie's interesting to me because I do like this movie. I've rewatched it a couple of times, and I do think it's a fun movie. It's fairly generic, but I do really like it. Now, the designs are also interesting to me. Not necessarily because they're inaccurate, because they are, but because the environment is just so realistic. Of course, Pixar really goes for realistic animation, and when you look at the humans, it doesn't look as bad. It's not much of a contrast. But when you see like Arlo standing in just these beautifully animated, rendered landscapes, and it's just so jarring. But we'll focus on the designs. I might watch this movie and do a review on it. That's something that's on my list, so I probably won't say too much about that. Anyway, the designs certainly remind me of when I was a child, as in how I used to draw dinosaurs when I was really, really young. Of course, I wasn't accurate when I drew them, and I added my own little exaggerated features to them, and that's exactly what their designs remind me of, and I like it because of that. That just brings me back to that time. I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of this kind of like solid bright green color with just a little bit of darker green coloration in here. But all things considered, I think the designs are really fun, and we get some individual variation with him and the rest of his family, of course, to distinguish them as characters. But I just think that's a really fun portrayal of the animal, looking at it as a whole. Okay, so that's a good bulk of Apatosaurus that showed up in TV shows and movies. So now we will go ahead and move on to Brontosaurus. Brontosaurus is, of course, separate from Apatosaurus, hence why they're in their own little sections. The history between these two animals is, of course, very fun. So they were both discovered by Othniel Charles Marsh, and he found Apatosaurus first, and he described it and everything, named it, and then he discovered Brontosaurus later on, and of course he classified it as a new genus as Brontosaurus. But then later, once we reach, I think, 1902, there was some analysis done on these two specimens, and they found, and it concluded that Brontosaurus was simply just another species of Apatosaurus, because the way that taxonomy works, whichever one was named first gets claimed to the name. So because Apatosaurus was found first, Brontosaurus became a species of Apatosaurus, and that was the end of Brontosaurus. Until 2015, so almost 10 years ago, son of a gun. But until 2015, when a team of paleontologists did extensive research and looked at several different sauropod specimens, and they found that there was enough skeletal differences between the specimen of Brontosaurus and Apatosaurus to classify them as their own genus. So as we stand today, Brontosaurus is its own genus separate from Apatosaurus. And that's why we're looking at them separately. Anyway, I just wanted to get that history out there because I think it's extremely interesting, and that's why I wanted to include them in the same video, because their histories are so intertwined anyway. Anyway, Brontosaurus has a bit more of a history in film and TV than Apatosaurus, and that's because Brontosaurus was kind of like, it had a very striking name. It, of course, translates to thunder lizard, and so it feels like the public took to Brontosaurus a little bit more. It became the sauropod dinosaur, the type of dinosaur that you would think of when thinking of sauropod dinosaurs. It was always Brontosaurus to mind. So because of that, it has a lot of appearances in media. So we have a lot to look, well, a few more, I feel, than we did for Apatosaurus anyway. Starting off with Gertie the Dinosaur. This is one of the first ever animated films done ever. And it's definitely the first ever dinosaur done, animated dinosaur, which is incredible. Of course, anatomically, it's extremely different, but the filmmaker did say that they based it off of the Brontosaurus skeleton, so of course I am counting it as a Brontosaurus. And it looks really cool. The animation is so fluid and so interesting to see it like this, especially when it swallows the whole tree. Kind of reminds me of Godzilla vs. Kong, But this is extremely important for animation and really the public's view on dinosaurs as a whole. So, of course, we definitely had to start off with this one in terms of Brontosaurus. And then after that, there's the Ghost of Slumber Mountain, where we get a really, really, for its time, Brontosaurus with a low-hanging head, a tail that's dragging on the ground, just a low animal in general. It's not dragging its belly, of course, which is something that had been proposed in the past. But this is just... It's so cool to go back and look at this stuff. Like, look at that. That's amazing, ain't it? Then we have The Lost World 1925, where we get a few instances of a Brontosaurus, including a point where it is fighting off theropod dinosaurs, and where it's brought back to the mainland and it wreaks havoc on the city. Again, it's for its time, dragging its tail, but the head is a lot more upright. Of course, Brontosaurus likely would have held its head a little bit more horizontal. Not as horizontal as some depictions, but definitely a little bit more horizontal than what it's being shown right here. Like, I think that Brontosaurus and Apatosaurus did have flexible necks, but I don't think it was as flexible as something like this. But anyway, this is another very important dinosaur movie in general. Like, The Lost World 1925, that is one of the quintessential dinosaur movies, especially concerning the fact that it uses stop motion, which is something that I'm always a fan of. Then we have a very horrifying Brontosaurus in the 1933 King Kong that looks like this. Very, very, very nasty, very gnarly. Also, it's absolutely massive, but it looks very cool. But then we'll go ahead and fast forward to 2005, because why not talk about both the King Kongs in the same breath? Because, of course, the 2005 King Kong is, in a lot of ways, a shot-for-shot remake of the original. I mean, not necessarily a shot-for-shot remake, but it stayed really true to the original. But we get a Brontosaurus herd in the 2005 King Kong, and of course that leads to a very cool stampede scene. I love their design here because they are very reminiscent of the old depictions of Brontosaurus, and for a movie that was really kind of like a tribute to that original King Kong movie, I love that they did things like that to really just kind of drive it home. Like, you get realistic looking textures and a more realistic looking dinosaur now using CGI, but it still has like the same kind of proportions and like neck flexibility as some old depictions of Brontosaurus. So that's a long-winded way for me to say that I love this depiction in the 2005 King Kong. And then we'll look at Fantasia. Now, there's a few instances where we do get to see them. One of the main being when they're in the water. This is very reminiscent of old thoughts of how sauropods can actually hold their weight. It was thought that they were just too heavy to support their weight on land, so a lot had proposed the idea that they were semi-aquatic, as in they spent most of their time in water. That's why you'll see a lot of old paleo art that depicts Brontosaurus like that, and that's exactly what Disney went for here in the Rite of Spring short. Just vertical necks out of the water, eating the water vegetation, and just hanging out in the water. Again, I like seeing stuff like this because it does remind me of our thought process when these dinosaurs were still very fresh to the public eye. So it's very fun to see them like that in this type of film. Next up, we have The Lost Continent, another old movie. And of course, much like the other ones that I mentioned, this one has the vertical neck, dragging tail, and is very cool to look at. I can't say much more else about it than just I like seeing these older depictions. I'm uncertain if this one counts. This is a Slurpasaur from The Lost World 1960. And if you'll remember, the Slurpasaurs in The Lost World 1960 are the greatest. This is meant to be an iguanodon. Yeah. So I've read a few things saying that this fella right here is supposed to be a Brontosaurus. But when I looked it up, it says that it's a Tudisaurus or a Tudisaurus or something along those lines. It's something like that. So I don't know if it was like meant to be a Brontosaurus at first and then was renamed to this because it looks absolutely nothing like a Brontosaurus, but I don't know. I just figured I'd include it anyway because, like I said, I just got some conflicting things about this animal right here. So just in case it was meant to be Brontosaurus, look at this and weep. And then after that we have 1 million years BC. Of course, another Ray Harryhausen Brontosaurus. Dragging its tail, head that's a little bit more vertical, very lumbering in sort of a way. It's just very cool. You know, it certainly looks like how Brontosaurus used to look. So they achieved that very well in terms of accuracy for the time. That's a way to look at it. This was accurate for the time. Isn't that fun? But no, it's another great design. We haven't really looked at any bad designs yet, but this is another great one. Well, except for the last Lost World, but you know. We don't talk about Bruno and all that good stuff. And then Planet of Dinosaurs. This has been both called an Apatosaurus and a Brontosaurus. My assumption is that it was made as a Brontosaurus at first, and then they were like, hey, Brontosaurus doesn't exist, so they were like, oh shoot, okay, this is an Apatosaurus. Anyway, I just put it in the Brontosaurus part. Dragging its tail, looks very similar to a lot of the ones that we've seen already, so I can't add anything new. But yeah, that is Planet of Dinosaurs, Brontosaurus. And then there's Zubumafu. Very animated. I don't think they necessarily had the budget. I know this is more so for like educational purposes, but we get like a solid color throughout the whole animal. And yeah, there's really not too many. I've noticed there's really not too many opportunities for me to look at these animals' feet, like I said I would. Oh well, but anyway, that's Zaboomafoo. Now, this is a little project called Dinosaur Empire, something that will be releasing on YouTube. I've seen a few trailers. It has my boy Ceratosaurus in it, so I am incredibly excited to see it. There is a Brontosaurus from what it looks like in this image right here. Looks absolutely amazing. I've seen a few like paleo reconstructions that put those spikes on the bottom of its throat. I do not know how likely something like that is. I haven't really seen anyone refute it. I don't know if there's anything to suggest that they had it, but it's so cool to see it. Like I said, I've seen that before, but man, it's such an interesting flare. Yeah, that is a project that I'm very excited to see finished. And then we have a few game appearances. I don't know if Apatosaurus is... now we're looping back to both Apatosaurus and Brontosaurus just to talk about some of these games. I don't know if Apatosaurus is actually in the game. I don't know if it's a mod, but there is a design right here that looks like this. Looks very good. You know, I do know there's some people who have brought up that, you know, these are not necessarily meant to be the actual dinosaurs in Ark, like they're different species entirely. And yeah, I know that. But the thing is that they're like based off of the actual dinosaur in real life. So that's why I include them in the videos. Like, you know, this might not be Smilodon technically, but it is certainly based off of Smilodon. Anyway, so this is... I don't know. Again, I don't know if this is a mod. I haven't been able to find anything, but it looks very cool, I think. I think it looks really good, honestly. After that, I know for a fact Brontosaurus is in the game because I have found it personally, and I think it looks really good too. Like, I mean, the neck is a little bit more vertical and it's absolutely massive, but I think it's really cool. I think it does a really good job at portraying the animal in that way. We get a very, very interesting Apatosaurus in Zoo Tycoon that kind of has this type of look to it, very thin neck, very thin legs. And then finally, we will look at Jurassic Park Builder that has a Brontosaurus. Still miss this game. My love for this game is never fading, but it looks really cool. That is definitely a Jurassic style Brontosaurus design, and I think that would be a perfect dinosaur to show up in a game like this. Not much else I can say. Just the way that I just like its shape. I think it has a very good shape. Anyway, that's about it. That's a good portion of the interpretations of both Brontosaurus and Apatosaurus. I do hope you guys enjoyed this video. This was a very fun one to make. Now, little announcement. Of course, we are very, very close to the many interpretations of Tyrannosaurus Rex. I think we're at 9,500 subscribers right now. So that means we're only 500 away from me making that video. I am still in the pre-production phase of that video, and let me tell you, like, it is long. It will be a long video because I'm wanting to go all out for that video. I want to include as many as I possibly can. Of course, I won't be able to include every single one, but I am trying to include all that I can, and that list is absolutely massive. So I don't think I will get it out like right at 10,000. It might be like another week or so after that, but I am still working on it, and once we reach 10,000, I will be getting that video out as soon as I possibly can. So certainly be looking out for that. That will be very exciting to do. I might be putting out a poll for this next video. Again, it depends on how like how many subscribers I gain within the next week or so, because I don't know if we'll do another one of these videos before T-Rex or we'll wait until after. I might put up a poll for that too and let you guys decide. Anyway, that's where we currently stand with all of that. Thank you guys so much for subscribing. It truly does mean a lot to me. I really wasn't expecting to grow as fast as we have been, and so that is just incredibly awesome. But that's pretty much all I have for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have an awesome day.